And we're now recording. So welcome to our Introduction to Networks class meeting for the week of 2/21/17. About said 16, but 2/21/17. I appreciate everyone being here. What I want to do today is continue to kind of look at Chapter 2, rolling into Chapter 3 a little bit. Before we get started here, one of the things I want to discuss about class is don't forget about our net labs, okay? So one of the things that we've got to see here is there's some zero labs on the intro class. So I can see one of the cool things about this. I can actually go look at a lab I did today because I had a lab that I did for myself to test something. But I can go in here to the roster on this class, and I can actually go in here and look and see where I did this IPS lab. And I can look at every single command that I put in. And I think I've shown you all that before, but it's really neat. That's what the net labs can do. And so you can see where you typed in. I've got a student who had an issue. In fact, you know what? I should have thought of that. Should have been able to look at that. But I've got issues that I can look at if I need to. And I also can tell whether or not labs are being completed. And we got a lot of zeros here. So when we get to doing our hands-on labs, let's make sure we're doing those. So that's where we're going to do the hands-on labs to work on real gear. Now, I will tell you too, since all of you are in the intro class, if you do have some real gear to your school and you want to work on that gear and do some of the labs on that gear, I have no problem with that whatsoever. You can still fill out the Word document. Just take a picture of the gear you use for me and upload it. You know, just upload it with your phone and say, hey, I did it with this gear. Because our NetLab system is there, so I can at least see you do some of the labs and know that you did them via hands-on equipment, not just packet tracer, not just a simulator. But I also want you to get used to your equipment at your school, so you're working on that. Also, please be aware if you have any questions about your gear at your school, don't be afraid to ask me. I can share pictures of our setup here at Stanley. We are by no means experts at what we've done. We've been at it for 17 years, so we've been able to settle on some things that have worked well for us. So if you're looking at building your lab out and you need some information, then by all means, please reach out and talk to me. And especially if you're going to order gear, the Cisco Networking Academy, as an academy, gives you a discount on gear. And so I can get you in touch with the correct people to make sure you get discounts for your school. All right, having said that, let's get started with some content here. So let's talk about out-of-band management. Out of these three right here, console, SSH, and telnet, which of these three are out of band and which of the three are in band management? Anybody can answer that if you want to. Does anybody know the difference between in band and out of band management?
Console would be in band, right?
Console would be out of band.
Out of band.
Yep. Because here's what you want to think about. With the console, you're not going across the network to get to the device. You have to literally physically plug into the console. So it is considered out-of-band management. Now,
oh, okay.
Now, you could say in some ways that if you had a dedicated management network that you could connect management network interfaces to, you could say that would be out-of-band too. But for the purposes of CCNA, we don't get that fancy. We pretty much say out-of-band management would be the console or possibly the auxiliary port, one of the two. In-band would be going across the network, so actually connecting across the network. In our case, SSH, which is secure shell, which allows you to connect with an encrypted connection between the network device and your machine. And then telnet, which allows you to connect but does not allow you to go through, okay? And I believe John's going to drop out and reinitiate. Okay, that's no problem. I'm still recording here. So those are the two big ones, in-band and out-of-band. Out-of-band is connecting not over your network. In-band is connecting over the network. Now, here's our terminal elimination programs again. We can use PuTTY, which allows us to set up a serial connection if we have one. I kind of went over this last time. TerraTerm, Secure CRT. What's the other one? There's like a PuTTY on steroids. A lot of people use, but they're all available there. So now, what modes do we have in a Cisco device? Now, in this case, you see here, we have a video. I'm not going to sit here and watch the video with you, but they actually have some pretty neat little videos here. And if you need it to have captions, you can turn them on.
The first thing I'll need to do is click on switches.
They're on.
And then I'll click on the 29th.
But we are not going to watch this video. I'm going to actually talk about the different modes, and those are these. There are two modes on almost, well, on all Cisco devices, really. User exec mode and privilege exec mode. Now, when we go into, and I'm going to grab me just a quick reservation here for my student. And I'll do this and let it be booting while we're doing this. Let's just do. It'll be fine. Again, this is the process of giving yourself a reservation. Up to 4 hours max. All right. But as we're looking here, you see there's a user exec mode, which is, I call this designated by the alligator mouth, or the greater than sign. And this is a mode where you can look but not change, and that's the way I kind of tell students. You're not able to do full, well, you can't do any configuration of the device at all, and you have limited monitoring commands. This user exec mode could be where you let someone go into if they were just going to look at a router or look at a switch and do some basic troubleshooting. Privileged exec mode, when you get the pound sign after the name of the device, allows you full, complete access. You can make changes to the router or switch. You can do all the troubleshooting commands. You can run some debug commands that have a dramatic impact upon the router or the switch's ability to function. So privileged exec mode is you've got full control. So it's kind of, you can imagine privileged exec mode to be root level. Down the road, you're going to learn about privilege levels between 0 and 15, 0 being user exec mode, 15 being privileged exec mode. But for what we're doing right now, these two modes are the ones that you need to focus on mainly. Now, I want to show you a couple things. And again, you're looking here, once we look at our two main modes, then there are sub-modes. And you don't need to get too caught up in all of this because you're going to see that there are a multitude of modes in all kinds of devices, and there's all types of sub-modes, there's all types of different parts of the Cisco iOS. You're going to learn how to understand the iOS. And it's funny, people always ask me, what programming languages do you know? Well, now I know a little bit of Python, not much, enough to be dangerous, very dangerous. And but I know the iOS, and the iOS is in some ways not a programming language, but it is a syntax that you learn. I can also figure out from the way Cisco iOS works, I've got help commands that allow me to look for different things, different items. If I don't know a command, but I know it starts with an S, I can put an S question mark. And that will give me some starting point for what I'm going to do. So you're going to see that we have these two main modes, user exec and privilege exec. And then from there, once we're in privilege exec, there are configuration modes. And you can see those are delineated by this config pound. This is what's called global config mode. This would allow you to make changes that affect the overall device, the global device. Things such as host names, which gives a name to the device. Things like banner message of the day. Setting enable secret passwords. And those are passwords that allow you to go from user exec mode to privilege exec mode. And then from there, we can do all types of sub-configuration. Line configuration modes, interface configuration modes, routing protocol configuration modes, route map configuration mode, you name it. There's hundreds of sub-configuration modes from there. We're going to learn the basics of how do I get into a device and how do I do basic configuration on it. So I'm in a switch, and of course it's waiting for me to log in, comply with everything here, finally get in. This is a Cisco 2960 switch. And you'll see by default, if you connect to the console port on a switch, and it doesn't have any, sometimes Cisco switch sends it out with some default username passwords on it, admin, or admin Cisco. But by default, once you connect to the console port, you're going to be sitting at the user exec prompt. So we also see here that one of the first things it asks you is, do you want to do what's called initial setup configuration mode? And we always answer no to that because we don't want to walk through that particular thing. Yeah, I wish it would hurry up and let go. Okay, but get done. Let's go. All right, finally. So now I'm sitting at the switch in user exec mode. You'll notice if I do a question mark, now that is my help command. If I do a question mark, you will notice that there's what, page and a half of commands pretty much that I have available. So I can't go into config mode, config terminal. I can't do that. By the way, I'm going to show you real quick. Just ignore what I'm doing here. This is line console 0 because I'm in the console 0. There's a command called logging synchronous. I'm going to drop all the way back out, folks. Sorry for that little aside, but you'll notice how big a difference this makes in a minute when I make changes. But you'll see if I do a question mark, there's a page and a half. If I go and type enable, and that's the command to go from user exec to privilege exec. You'll notice I'm now in privilege exec mode, shown by the pound sign. If I do a question mark, there's one page, there's 2 pages, there's 3 pages, and a quarter. So you have 3 1/4 pages of commands. So you can see there are a large number of commands available in privilege exec mode that are not available, and I can type exit to get back, that are not available in user exec mode. So many times we call user exec mode the look-see mode because all you can do is look around and not really do a whole lot. Now, once I get into privilege exec mode, you'll notice that I can then go into config terminal. A lot of times most people shorten that to config T. And you'll notice that we can now, we have all types of configuration commands that we could put in here. One of the most common and one you're going to learn is I can say host name and give this switch a name of S1. Now this host immediately becomes switch S1. You will learn that all configuration takes place in what is known as the running config file. The running config file is held in RAM, and it will disappear when you reboot the system. So if you do not save it to the startup config, it will go away. And I think we talked a little bit about the different parts of a router and switch last time and what's stored where. If not, that's later in this chapter or in chapter 3. I'm teaching routing and switching essentials in this class back to back. I've got that class next. And there's some overlap in these first couple chapters, so forgive me if I say something and they're actually in my other class. I've been hit by a truck, so I got a little bit of an excuse. I got at least 6 more months of that again. All right. So, but here's the cool thing. I'm going to teach you a command they don't even teach you in the curriculum. It's called the do command. So if I do a do show run, you will see my running config, and you'll see host name of S1. Now, if I just tried to type show running config, it would say show commands not found. In fact, if I do SO, the only thing it's got is show, shell, and shutdown. But the do command lets you run commands that would not normally be available inside of configuration mode. This is the curriculum shows you this. The curriculum will say, okay, you want to run a show running config command. So you need to type exit, get back to privilege exec, then type show. By the way, that's what logging console does. Notice how logging synchronous, it automatically brought me back to a line, a clear line, instead of having me typing at the end of it. So always put logging synchronous on your console lines. You'll learn all this. I'm just showing you the basics here. But now, see that I can do a show running config. And by the way, I can hit the tab key just like Linux. And if it is a command that is able to be completed, in other words, and not ambiguous, that command will be completed. I can do a show running config there. But that was a waste of time to drop all the way out. I'm in global config. I'm making configurations. I need to do something. Do show IP int brief. Okay, that's a command. Well, if you don't put don't put that on the end. So now I'm able to see all the ports and their status on my switch. Okay, and I did not have to drop all the way back out, and then I can configure my configuration here. So if I wanted to go into an individual port or interface, FA01, And you'll notice now config-if. So now I'm in interface configuration mode. And help is sensitive or context sensitive. So all the help commands, when I do the question mark inside of config-if, I'm only going to see the commands that are related to the interface config. So see, this is starting with AAA and ARP. If I do a Control-C and type exit to drop back one, you'll see here it's AAA access list, access session, so that the help is context sensitive. Here's another cool thing. Again, let's imagine I knew the command started or know the command starts with an S, but I can't remember the command. I can always type S question mark and it will show me all commands that start with an S. Okay, very helpful. You know, there's SDM, D question mark. Very helpful if you cannot remember that command, but you know, well, it's got something to do with VTP. You know, let's go VT, all right, it's VTP space question mark. Then it gives me the rest of it. So now I've got all the parts I could add about VTP. And again, you don't know what VTP is probably, but you will as we move through this course, as we move through these 4 different courses you have with me. Are there any questions at this point about the difference between, again, user exec mode, type enable, and privilege exec mode, or global config, and then subconfig modes? Any questions on those?
The only question I got is that do command. Can you run it in any mode?
The only one you don't run it in, like if I'm sitting out here and I want to do a show run, you know, and I try to do a do, you know what, that's a good question, because I haven't tried that. Yeah, so it won't work here, because it's only when you're inside of configuration mode and you want to run a command that's normally not in config mode.
Okay.
So basically it puts the command into the context of just privilege exec mode. If that makes sense.
Yes.
So basically what it says here is say, run this as if you were just sitting at the privilege exec command prompt. And if you're back here at the privilege exec command prompt and try to run do, it makes no sense. Okay. Actually, did I have to? Okay, that's kind of cool. I didn't know that actually worked. Do test ePOL cable. Okay. So there is a do command, but it's not the one that works inside of the privilege or configuration mode. I'll tell you right now, I never stop learning stuff. And I've worked on these devices for 18 years. Plus they keep adding stuff too, which is kind of wild. I'll show you a couple other things real quick. John, you got any other questions on that?
No, actually, I was just curious about that.
No problem. Any questions you have? I always say the only bad question is the one that's not asked, because that's the one you don't get answered, and none of us learn. I say I just learned something there myself. There's actually a do command at privilege exec mode. All right, so I showed you that there was a running config, okay? And the only thing I have in here right now really is this hostname S1, and down here under my console, I did do login synchronous under my console. If I reboot this right now, all of that is gone, because if I do a show startup, you'll notice the startup config is here, but there's none of that has been saved. So you see what the name of its hostname is switch, and if I go down, you'll see that nothing's under the line console. So if I wanted to save my running config to my startup config, I can type copy running config to startup config. And by the way, this is what you should do on the exam. This is how you should do it on the exam. This is how you should teach your students. And then in the real world, you're going to learn this. You're going to say, well, that's a whole lot of typing. I'm going to type WR, which is short for write. You also could do write mem. Used to be write mem, but WR is the same thing. WR means copy run start. And so you'll see if I do that, or if you see me do that during demonstrations, please be aware I'm running the copy run start command. They've said for years they were going to take these commands out, but they haven't. Thank goodness, because it's a wonderful little command to have available. Okay, well, let's bounce back over here. So we've seen our 2 modes and some of our configuration modes. Getting between the modes, going enable to go from user exec to privilege exec. Disable will drop you completely out of exec mode. Let me show you a couple other tricks too. If you're in here and you want to drop into, from privilege exec out to user exec, you can type end, or exit, sorry, exit. We'll take you back out. I think, let's see, disable, we'll do it too, well, if I spell it right. Yep, disable will drop you back out. If you're inside of privilege exec mode, and let's say you're in configuration mode, and you're deep down into, you know, FA01, and you want to drop completely out of configuration mode. You don't want to go back one level. Now, if you just want to go back one level, type exit. You'll go back from the level you're in over, okay? But FA01, if you want to drop completely out, you can hit Control-Z, and that will drop you back to privilege exec mode, okay? So that's Control-Z. All that's in the text here, but I want to show you one more cool thing. This is where people waste a lot of time in configuring routers and switches. FA01, right? All right, so, and I'm going to say description. This is a command, example for interface config number 1. Okay, so that's my description for that. Now watch this. I'm going to hit the up arrow. The up arrow repeats, puts in the last thing I did. I'm also then going to FA02, hit enter. Now you'll notice it looks like nothing at all happened. But I actually just went from interface F01's configuration to interface F02, and I didn't have to back one level and then go back into the interface. I'm actually jumping from those two contexts. Don't do it if you get confused, but if you can learn to do this, you can very quickly do things like this. There's number 2, and I want to go to F03, and there's 3, and I can do there's number 3, and all kinds of things like that. And then now if I do a do show run, you will see descriptions on F01, F02, and F03, and all of those were accomplished very quickly without me having to bounce back and forth. You know, I could have done this. I'm in F03, right? I could have done exit, and then do interface FA04, and then hit the up arrow twice because I'm not going to retype that, and do 4. And then I could have done exit, and then I could have done interface. But why do that when I can just bounce between the contexts very quickly? Now, I will tell you this. I have made some very dumb mistakes doing that. You know, get in a hurry. I end up with the same IP address on 2 different interfaces, or end up with the wrong IP address on the wrong interface. So be aware, it does save time, but if you're not concentrating and paying attention to what you're doing, you can majorly mess up doing something like that. So I want to get completely out of.
Hey, Kelly.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Hey, would it not benefit to do that as you're configuring that interface to go ahead and give it the name versus the way you just did it? I mean, I see the benefit there, but I'm a little confused on why you would want to name them all together at once unless you already had the naming scheme in place.
Well, and that was good. Yeah, that was just an example. That's
okay.
all it was.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, unless you knew, for instance, let's say you know that interface 04, let's say you know that the actual description for interface is connection to PC4 in WTC 114. Okay, then I can hit the up arrow twice, go 05, and then I know that this one's going to be connected to PC5. Yeah, you would have to know what's being connected to what.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, that was just an example to show that you could bounce between them and put descriptions on it quickly.
Okay.
I'll show you another cool command that a lot of people don't know about. And this is talked about just a little bit later, but FA01, 0/120. I can now put a configuration on the entire set of ports from 01 to 20 using what's called the interface range command. So if there was something I needed to do to all 20 of those, I could do it. So I could actually say just description, connection to VLAN 10, WTC 110.
Gotcha.
And then now what I've done is I just put that description on every single one of those switch ports.
Right.
So if I was connecting a bunch of ports to the same, for instance, in our example, if I had a bunch of ports connected to a VLAN for storage, for a storage thing, I would use the interface range command and then say, you know, they're connected to VLAN 777. And then that would put all those, you know, description connected to VLAN 777 storage. And then you know all 20 of those are what's connected to your storage. So pretty neat little thing you can do there. One of the things you saw me do was a line configuration mode. Now we talked a little bit about lines and we talked a little bit about what's on a router. Well, you'll notice, I'm going to do a do show run. You'll notice when I get down to the bottom in this config down here, and I could have typed it and started it. I'm being a little lazy here, folks, from typing, but you'll notice that there is a line console. That is the physical port that you plug into on the switch or the router. And then there are VTY lines. Now on a switch, by default, there are 16 VTY lines, 0 to 15. On a router, there are 5, 0 to 4. The VTY lines are for remote access to the switch. And the, excuse me one second. And the V2I lines are for remote access over the network via in-band management. They can be configured to accept Telnet, or they can be configured to accept only SSH. We'll learn how to do both. But when you want to go into the line configuration mode, you can just go line con 0, and you're in line configuration mode, or you can go line V2I. Now notice since there's 15 of these, you got to do 0 to 15 if you want to configure all of them at one time, and you do. You don't want to have. Okay, I can't think of any good reason why you would not have the same configuration on all your V2I lines, because you never know which one you're going to connect to when you connect with in-band management. So, but those are our lines, and we can configure those with passwords. We'll talk about those shortly. So here we see the basic iOS command structure. It is some command, well, prompt first, then some command, space, keywords or arguments, okay, and then you can also have what the variables. So it's a keyword argument, or our variable argument is basically a variable. So in this case, the show IP protocols is showing the routing protocols running on a particular device, or ping, and then the destination is the ping for that particular switch. So that's our basic structure, and you'll learn how this kind of works, so you can start guessing and looking at different things. Now in our text, what we typically do is boldface. Anything's boldface, you enter exactly the way it is, such as description or whatever. Italics are arguments that you supply the value, so a lot of times those are variables. And then square brackets are optional elements, and braces are required elements that are an argument or keyword. And then you can do vertical lines, and that's a choice. This basically says you can do X or Y and Z. So. Help features. I've already showed you this pretty much, but you can walk through and see how you use the question marks. Now you've got many hotkeys. Again, the tab key, which is just, you learn to use the tab key, and it's one of the greatest things since sliced bread. You know, you're in here and you're wanting to do set the host name, type host tab, and it does it. You can also shorten it. You can type, and you have to be careful because it has to be the command level that is unambiguous. So if I try to go HKFC, my initials, nope, it's not going to work because it doesn't recognize the command H. But if I do HOKFC, it actually works. You notice it changed the host name to KFC, because if I do a H question mark, you'll see that HO is not ambiguous. So I can actually shorten it to that, and that will give me the command. So that's one shortcut is to shorten it to the least, to the first unambiguous command level, or just hit tab. It's another one. Up arrow key is really good because it takes you back through all the commands that you have in your history. Okay. The other thing you can do, a Control A takes you back to the beginning of a command, level. So if I'm all the way at the end, I can also do Control E to go to the end. So I'm bouncing back and forth here by hitting Control A and Control E. All right. Now all these things like cursor, erase the key, all that, I just use the backspace keys. I mean, yeah, it's pretty easy there. Control C drops us out. There is a Control Shift 6X if you happen to get in a situation where you're doing a DNS lookup or trace route or something's going wild. You have to hit Control Shift 6, and then most time you hit X too, and it will pop you back out. So those are all our shortcuts. Learn these, and life will be much easier as you're configuring Cisco devices. Now, we have some labs here. Most of you have already done some of these, but we do have labs inside of NetLabs that you can do. We're going to go through now a basic device configuration of what we do here. And we're going to look first at host name. So device name should start with a letter, contain no spaces, end with a letter or digit, use only letter, digits, and dashes, and be less than 64 characters in length. And it should also be set based upon your company's policy. Now in this case, they do use names to tell you where the switches were. So SW floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, let you know where the switches are. So names that are easily identifiable help you when you're bouncing around the network, especially when you're using SSH and you're going across the network to multiple different places, and you end up in a switch and you suddenly go, where am I? And you realize, oh, okay, I'm on switch, switch 3 in this building, which makes life easier for you. How to configure a host name? Hostname command. Okay, so nothing majorly wild there, just host name and then that. Now this is kind of cool. This is not a Quizlet, but a configuration little template that you can use. It actually say enter configuration mode and configure the switch host name. Now if you type config T like I've been showing you, it's going to say it's not going to work. You must put in the full command. So this prepares you for the exam so that you know the full commands. Okay, you can't shorten them, and it has to match even in case exactly. But it's a good way to just get some quick practice without having to go all the way out to Packet Tracer or out to NetLabs. All right. So it's syntax checker to help you to learn the syntax. Now we're going to want to secure our devices. We do not want anybody on the planet to be able to walk in, connect to our device with a console cable and be sitting at user exec mode. Even worse, we don't want them just to be able to type enable and go directly into privilege exec mode. So we got to learn how to put some passwords on our routers and switches. So here's what we do first. We're going to go into global config, and we can set a password to control access to our privilege exec mode. That is a password called the enable secret password. I'm just going to use class. Never use this password because it's what's used in all the Cisco examples. So don't use this, but I'm putting it in here for now just to show you. But if I do enable secret class, watch what happens. I'm sitting in user exec mode, and I type enable to go into privilege exec mode, and it now prompts me for a password. And I put in class, and I'm in. All right. Now, if I connect a cable directly to the console, I'm getting in the console without doing anything. So we need to, some way, secure the console. So we'll go into global config. Not lin, line con 0. We're going to put in a password. Again, never use this password, Cisco. And we're going to say login. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and do it on the VTY lines too, just because I won't have to bounce back in here. By the way, up arrow is your friend. Remember, you can do password and then login, and you're good. Okay. Now I'm going to do Control Z, type exit. And you'll notice now I'm prompted for a password to get into the console. I'm not even able to get into user exec mode without putting in the password. Same would be true if I tried to telnet across to the VTY line. Now, the good news is I've put all these passwords and all in, but the bad news is if I do a show run, you will see that these passwords are in, other than the enable secret, which is actually encrypted, the passwords for the VTY lines and the console lines are in clear text. So somebody could shoulder surf this. So another command we need to put in is service password encryption. And you'll see here that I'm lazy. And now if I do a do show run, notice that the passwords are encrypted for, and I need to start. Sorry, I'm not piping it, folks. Like I said, they're encrypted. All right. Now, be aware that this level 7 encryption can be broken in about 2 seconds. So let me see if I can find a page without getting my machine infected with something. So Cisco level. All right, so here's a password cracker. It took me, holy Google, about 5 seconds. You'll see that the passwords are cracked that easily. So this is not something that's going to protect your config file if it gets out in the wild, but it's at least going to keep somebody from shoulder surfing it. All right, so be aware of that. Still good to do, very, very good. And then you can also put in a banner, MOTD, and the thing about a banner message of the day is whatever character you choose, that's my delineating character or beginning character. I can then do all kind of ASCII art I want. But if I put that pound sign in again, then that's what ends the banner message of the day. So if you're in all kind of ASCII art, you can do stuff like this, and you can go, you shall not pass. And given time, I'd make it look better. But this is just quick because I don't want to waste your time sitting here doing this. But you can kind of see that we can build us a little bit of ASCII. Now, one of the things you need to realize is you should have your legal team come up with your banner message of the day. So when I hit enter here, it's going to say, you shall not pass. You need to say that in Gandalf's voice. But you do not want to put something like welcome or anything that would let a hacker get off when they're getting into your system. So those are all of the items we did to secure our administrative access right there. So we're going to go through, and again, they talk about using passwords. Use passwords longer than 8 characters in length. Don't use anything out of the dictionary. Don't use anything people could guess about you. And here we see privileged exec passwords. So putting that in, exactly what I just showed you. And we see putting in the console password, so setting up a user exec password on the console, and also on the B2I lines, exactly what I showed you with a real router. And this has you do the service password encryption. And here's our banner MOTD. Just be aware, again, if that's your starting character, the second you put the other pound sign in it, it ends the message. So I'll be very careful of that. If you put that in your message anywhere, you can end up with some weird messages. Now, I've done all this work. I've put all this stuff in, but if I don't do a copy run start, it all goes away when I hold on a second, I did something wrong here. Copy run start. All right, yeah, that's all good. All configuration buffers full. Somebody is put a couple of files in here that are not the correct thing, and I believe that's causing an issue. And so I'm just going through and actually getting rid of these files, and let's see if we can do a WR now. Yep, nope. I have to reboot it, see what's going on, because the fast Ethernet 023 is causing an issue. Typically, you wouldn't have this. It'd just be a copy run start, and everything would be hunky-dory. And once it reboots, it'll be fine. Okay, so we do need to do a copy run start. Let's see if I want to do it again. If it won't, then we know what we got to do. Okay, I should have said yes. There we go. We're good. So we're good with that. I just said yes to it and made it actually copy it over there. So it's got to start up config now. In fact, I'm going to reboot this just to see it, make sure. Reload. Okay. And if you do auto running config, remember you must save it to the startup config. You can also capture the configuration file to a text file. You can do that by just being in PuTTY and selecting it, doing an edit copy. You can also, there are ways in PuTTY to actually do a show run and export it out. It's really easy, it's just to copy it instead of doing this session output and trying to do it that way. You can do it, but it's a little bit more work that way. And then folks are going to have a lab that has you do a basic switch config, so initial switch configuration and packet tracing. Last but not least, we need to put IP addresses on items. And to do that, we're going to have to put an IP address, subnet mask, and usually a default gateway. In addition, we're also going to put IP or configure interfaces and ports on our networking devices. In this case, the layer 2 switches and routers that we're going to put IP addresses on. Now, the weird thing about a layer 2 switch is its ports are not designed to have IP addresses on them. It needs to have an IP address added to a what's called a switched virtual interface. And for the first couple labs, we're going to use interface VLAN 1. We'll never use that in the real world because it's not a good thing. Here we have an example of putting a static IP address onto a PC. Everyone's probably done that before. IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. And we'll talk much more about IP addresses and what all this means. But just suffice, if you don't have a phone number, an IP address, you can't get to a device. You also have the option of get away at door, DHCP, we talked a little bit about, where you can get IP addressing through DHCP. Now, here's the thing about a switch. Again, a switch doesn't have a, and it's still booting here. That's the thing about these are real switches, so it takes a little while to boot. A switch doesn't have a port like a router that's designed to be connected directly to the network for management. It has a switched virtual interface. Now, we're going to use for the first couple labs and for most of this first class, interface VLAN 1. Once we actually learn how to configure switches, we're not going to use VLAN 1 because all ports on VLAN 1. We'll use a management VLAN that we create. But for us, all we have to do, and I'm just going to do a show me because we're going to do an interface VLAN 1, do IP address, put the IP address in the mask, and then you can do a no shut on it, and you should do a no shut on it, and it will bring it up and make it run. And then if you do a show IP int brief, my favorite command of all time, you will see your interfaces. Okay, so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to log in. And Cisco, and then I'm going to do class. I'm going to say class. I said I was going to, there we go. Config T. And I'm going to do interface VLAN 1. And I'm going to say IP add 192.168.1.3 255.255.255.0. No new shut. I'm going to do show IP int brief. You'll see now that VLAN 1 with 192.168.1.3 is up. And I can actually go back into my lab here if I wanted to. This is this switch here. And I can actually go in to this PC. And I'm going to statically assign an IP address on this PC. And I will ping between the two devices. Just to prove I can do it. That way if you're from Missouri and you show me state, you'll know we can do it. So, takes just a second here. 192.168.1.3 1.10. I'm not going to put a default gateway in because right now we don't even have one. We don't have a router, so we don't have a default gateway on this network. And I'm going to ping. I said I'm going to ping 192.168.1.3. And if I've done everything correctly, it should eventually work. And yes, it does. There we go. So 1.3 replied to my ping. And if I go to here, Control C, do ping 192.168.1.10, and it works good. So we've got pingage between the two. So we statically assign an IP address on the SVI, the switch virtual interface of the switch, on VLAN 1, and then we put an IP address statically on the PC, and we have the ability to ping between the two. And that will just keep it pinging forever and ever and ever and ever. Okay? So you hit Control C. And that's our end-to-end connectivity test. Can we ping? And folks, that is it for Chapter 2. And that's where we're going to stop because you still got a whole lot of work to do there in Chapter 2. And then we will pick up next week on Chapter 3. And if you have any questions, please let me know. A lot of you have already moved into Chapter 3, so just make sure you've read that. I'm going to actually stop the recording,